Daniel Carter lived a life that many would call perfect. He was a successful architect in a quiet suburban town, known for his charming smile and easygoing nature. His designs weren't just buildings, they were works of art, admired by clients and colleagues alike. People often said he had it all: a thriving career, a beautiful home, and a wife who seemed like the ideal partner. But what they didn't know was that beneath the polished surface, cracks were beginning to form. Emily Carter, Daniel's wife, was the kind of woman who lit up every room she entered. She loved hosting dinner parties, attending charity events, and being the center of attention. To outsiders, she appeared confident and self-assured, but inside she felt trapped. Over time, her role as the architect's wife started to weigh on her. While Daniel received accolades for his work, Emily felt overshadowed, as though her own dreams and ambitions didn't matter. She wanted more than just a supporting role in their picture-perfect life. Their house was a reflection of their outward success: modern furniture, expensive artwork, and a sprawling backyard with manicured lawns. It looked like something out of a magazine, but behind closed doors things weren't so harmonious. Arguments over finances, career goals, and even trivial matters became frequent. Emily accused Daniel of prioritizing his job over their relationship, while Daniel dismissed her concerns, saying she was overreacting. Neither of them realized how deep the resentment ran until it reached a boiling point. One evening, after yet another heated argument, Emily stormed off to bed without speaking to Daniel. That night, as he lay awake staring at the ceiling, Daniel couldn't help but reflect on their marriage. He wondered where things had gone wrong. They used to laugh together, dream together, and share everything. Now it felt like they were living parallel lives under the same roof. But despite the tension between them, Daniel never imagined that Emily would take drastic action. He assumed their problems were temporary, something they could fix with time. What no one, not even Emily, knew about Daniel was that he carried secrets far greater than their marital issues. Beneath his calm exterior, Daniel led a double life. By day, he worked as an architect, sketching blueprints and meeting deadlines. But by night, he transformed into someone entirely different. Under a pseudonym, Daniel operated as one of the most skilled and elusive art thieves in the underground world. His ability to plan intricate heists and slip through security undetected had earned him a reputation and a fortune. Yet this side of him remained hidden from everyone, including Emily. Daniel's secret life wasn't born out of necessity or desperation. Instead, it stemmed from a childhood fascination with puzzles and challenges. As a young boy, he would spend hours solving mazes and deciphering codes, finding joy in unraveling complex problems. This passion eventually evolved into something darker when, as a struggling architecture student, he stumbled upon the opportunity to steal a rare painting. The thrill of pulling off the heist hooked him instantly, and over the years, he honed his craft, building a network of contacts and hiding his earnings in offshore accounts. Despite his dual existence, Daniel tried hard to keep his two worlds separate. He believed that keeping Emily away from his criminal activities protected her. In truth, it also allowed him to maintain control over their lives. Emily thought she understood her husband, but she only saw the version of him he wanted her to see. And while she complained about feeling unimportant, Daniel knew that revealing the truth would shatter the fragile balance they had managed to maintain. The days leading up to Emily's departure were filled with tension. Small disagreements escalated into shouting matches, and both of them grew increasingly distant. One afternoon, during a particularly nasty fight, Emily shouted, "You don't care about me. You've never cared." Her words cut deeper than she intended, leaving Daniel stunned. For a moment, he considered telling her everything: the heists, the money, the danger, but he stopped himself. Revealing his secrets wouldn't solve their problems. It would only make them worse. That night, as Daniel sat alone in his study, going over blueprints, Emily made her decision. She packed her bags quietly, taking not only her clothes but also anything valuable she could carry. Jewelry, electronics, designer handbags, all of it disappeared into suitcases. Before leaving, she accessed their joint bank account and transferred every penny to her own. Even Max, their golden retriever, came with her. When she finally drove away in the early hours of the morning, The house felt eerily empty. For the first time in years, Daniel stood still, processing what had happened. He walked through the silent rooms, noticing the absence of Emily's perfume, the emptiness of the closets, and the void left by Max's wagging tail. Though hurt and angry, Daniel couldn't deny that part of him felt relieved. Without Emily around, he no longer had to pretend. He could focus entirely on his other life, the one she never suspected existed. As the sun rose over the quiet suburban neighborhood, Daniel realized that Emily's departure marked the beginning of a new chapter. Whether it would lead to freedom or chaos remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. Emily had taken everything she thought mattered, yet she had no idea who Daniel really was. The morning after Emily left, Daniel woke up to an unsettling quiet. The house, once filled with the hum of conversation, laughter, and even the occasional argument, now felt like a hollow shell. He shuffled into the kitchen, expecting to see Emily sipping her coffee at the counter or Max wagging his tail by the back door. Instead, he found nothing but silence. It took him a moment to process what had happened. At first, he thought maybe she had gone for a walk, but when he saw the empty hooks where her coats used to hang and the bare shelves in the closet, reality hit him like a punch to the gut. Emily hadn't just walked out, she had taken everything. Her clothes were gone, as were the expensive handbags she loved so much and the jewelry Daniel had gifted her over the years. Even the small mementos they had collected during their travels, the photo frames, the souvenirs, the little trinkets that held sentimental value, were missing. But it wasn't just personal belongings she had claimed. She had cleaned out their joint bank account, leaving behind not a single penny. Every last dollar was gone, transferred to her name without a trace. As Daniel moved through the house, he noticed other things she had taken. The designer furniture they had picked out together, pieces of art from the living room walls, and even the silverware set they had received as a wedding gift. It was as if Emily had erased herself and their life together from the house entirely. The only thing she hadn't touched was Daniel's study, perhaps because she assumed there was nothing valuable in there. Little did she know how wrong she was. Max, their golden retriever, was also missing. Daniel had grown fond of the dog over the years, though he rarely admitted it aloud. Max had always been more attached to Emily, following her around the house and curling up at her feet while she read or watched TV. Still, losing him stung. As Daniel stood in the empty backyard, staring at the spot where Max usually lounged in the sun, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. For all the tension between them, Max had been a constant presence, a reminder of happier times. Despite the emptiness surrounding him, Daniel didn't break down. Instead, he felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. He told himself that this was temporary, that sooner or later Emily would come to her senses and realize how irrational she had been. After all, they had built a life together, hadn't they? Surely she wouldn't throw it all away so easily. But deep down, Daniel knew better. This wasn't just another fight. It was something bigger, something final. What struck Daniel most was how calculated Emily's actions seemed. She hadn't acted impulsively or in the heat of the moment. No, she had planned this meticulously, likely for weeks or even months. Every detail had been thought out, from draining their bank account to taking the items she knew meant the most to him. It was almost as if she wanted to leave no room for reconciliation, no chance for him to win her back. And yet, despite her efforts, she had left one glaring oversight. She had no idea who Daniel really was. While Emily believed she had stripped him of everything, his money, his possessions, his pride, she had overlooked the one thing that truly defined him. His secret life, the one she never suspected existed, remained untouched. All those offshore accounts, hidden under aliases and protected by layers of encryption, were still intact. Millions of dollars worth of stolen art, carefully stored in secure locations across the globe, were still his. Emily might have taken the physical symbols of their marriage, but she couldn't touch the foundation of his true identity. Over the next few days, Daniel tried to piece together what had led to this moment. He replayed their arguments in his mind, searching for clues he might have missed. Had he been too dismissive of her feelings, too focused on his work or his other pursuits to notice how unhappy she had become. Or was it simply impossible to make someone like Emily happy, no matter what he did? These questions haunted him, but he refused to dwell on them for too long. Dwelling wouldn't change anything. Instead, Daniel threw himself into his work. He spent hours in his study, sketching blueprints and reviewing project proposals. Architecture had always been his escape, a way to channel his restless energy into something productive. Now more than ever, he needed that distraction. Yet even as he worked, his thoughts kept drifting back to Emily. Where was she staying? Was she okay? Did she regret any of it? One evening, as he sat alone in the dimly lit study, Daniel decided to do some digging of his own. Using skills honed from years of operating in the shadows, he accessed Emily's social media accounts and recent credit card transactions. It didn't take long to find traces of her new life. She had rented a small apartment downtown, far from their suburban neighborhood. Her posts showed glimpses of her new routine: lunches with friends, shopping trips, and nights out at trendy bars. To anyone else, it might have looked like she was thriving, but Daniel could see through the facade. There was a certain emptiness in her smile, a forced brightness that didn't quite reach her eyes. Watching Emily from afar gave Daniel mixed feelings. On one hand, he felt a surge of anger. How dare she take everything and act like nothing had changed? On the other hand, he couldn't deny feeling a flicker of admiration. She had played her part well, executing her plan with precision and leaving him blindsided. If anything, her actions proved that she was stronger than he had given her credit for. But strength alone wouldn't be enough to sustain her, not when the money ran out and the novelty of her new life wore off. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel began to settle into his new reality. Without Emily around, the house felt different, quieter, yes, but also freer. He no longer had to pretend to be the man she thought he was. He could focus on his work, both legitimate and otherwise, without worrying about keeping up appearances. In a way, her departure had given him a strange kind of liberation. Still, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. Emily might have walked away thinking she had won, but she had underestimated him. She had no idea what he was capable of, what resources he had at his disposal. And while he wasn't sure yet what his next move would be, one thing was clear: their story was far from over. After Emily's departure, Daniel found himself in a peculiar state of limbo. The house, once filled with the echoes of their shared life, now felt like an empty canvas waiting to be repainted. For the first time in years, he had no one to answer to, no schedules to coordinate, no expectations to meet, and no facade to maintain. At first, this newfound freedom was intoxicating. He spent his days immersed in architecture projects, pouring his energy into designing structures that were daring, innovative, and intricate. His clients praised his work, unaware of the turmoil brewing beneath his calm exterior. But as the initial shock of Emily's betrayal wore off, Daniel began to reflect on his life more deeply. Who was he really? To Emily, he had been a successful architect, a devoted husband, or so she thought, and a man who seemed content with the predictable rhythm of suburban life. But that version of Daniel was just one side of a much larger story. The truth was far more complex and dangerous. Daniel's double life had started almost accidentally. As a young man fresh out of college, he had struggled to make ends meet while juggling student loans and unpaid internships. One night, during a particularly low point, he stumbled upon an opportunity that changed everything. A friend of a friend mentioned a rare painting stored in a poorly secured gallery, a piece worth millions but overlooked by its owners. The challenge intrigued Daniel. It wasn't about the money at first. It was about solving the puzzle. Could he bypass the security systems? Could he slip in and out without being detected? The heist was flawless. Not only did Daniel walk away with the painting, but he also discovered a thrill unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Over time, what began as a reckless experiment evolved into a second career. Under the pseudonym Marcus Kane, Daniel became one of the most elusive figures in the underground art world. His reputation grew as word spread about his meticulous planning and ability to vanish without a trace. Marcus Kane didn't leave clues behind, or at least, none that anyone could follow. For years, Daniel managed to keep his two lives completely separate. By day, he designed buildings and attended networking events. By night, he plotted heists, sold stolen art to private collectors, and funneled his earnings into offshore accounts. No one suspected a thing, not his colleagues, not his friends, and certainly not Emily. She had always assumed his success came from hard work and talent alone. The idea that her mild-mannered husband moonlighted as a master thief would have seemed absurd to her. Now, sitting alone in his study, Daniel allowed himself to fully embrace the person he had hidden for so long. Without Emily around to question his late-night absences or scrutinize his spending habits, he felt untethered. For the first time, he didn't have to worry about keeping up appearances. He could focus entirely on the game, the thrill of outsmarting security systems, the adrenaline rush of pulling off impossible feats, and the satisfaction of knowing he was always 10 steps ahead of everyone else. Yet, despite the excitement, Daniel couldn't ignore the emptiness gnawing at him. Stealing art wasn't just about the money, it was about proving something to himself. Each successful heist reinforced his belief that he was smarter, sharper, and more capable than anyone else. But what good was all that brilliance if there was no one to share it with? In some ways, losing Emily made him realize how isolated he truly was. Even when she was part of his life, she had never known the real him. And now, with her gone, he was lonelier than ever. To distract himself, Daniel threw himself into planning his next big job. Word had reached him about a priceless artifact currently housed in a high-security museum, a centuries-old jade sculpture rumored to bring immense fortune to its owner. Breaking into the museum wouldn't be easy. It boasted state-of-the-art alarms, motion sensors, and round-the-clock guards, but that only fueled Daniel's determination. Challenges like this were what kept him sharp, what reminded him why he had fallen in love with the game in the first place. As he sketched out blueprints and studied surveillance footage, Daniel couldn't help but wonder what Emily would think if she knew the truth. Would she hate him for lying to her all these years? Or would she admire his cunning and resourcefulness? Part of him wished he could tell her, to watch her face as she realized just how wrong she had been about him. But another part of him knew better. Revealing his secrets wouldn't fix anything. It would only complicate matters further. Still, the thought lingered in the back of his mind. What if Emily hadn't left? What if she had stayed and discovered his true identity? Would they have been able to build a life together based on honesty instead of lies? These questions swirled in his head as he worked, distracting him from the task at hand. For all his intelligence and planning skills, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he had missed something important along the way. In the weeks following Emily's departure, Daniel also noticed subtle changes in his behavior. He became more withdrawn, avoiding calls from friends and canceling plans with colleagues. Some assumed he was grieving the end of his marriage, but the truth was more complicated. He wasn't mourning the loss of Emily as much as he was grappling with the realization that their relationship had been built on a foundation of half-truths and omissions. How could you miss someone you never truly knew? At the same time, Daniel's confidence soared. Without Emily's presence weighing on him, he felt invincible. Every decision he made, from choosing which jobs to take to deciding how to spend his newfound free time, was entirely his own. For years he had balanced two identities, constantly switching between them to avoid detection. Now he could finally let go of the pretense and embrace who he really was. Marcus Kane wasn't just a persona anymore. He was becoming Daniel's dominant self. One evening, as he sat poring over maps and schematics for the upcoming heist, Daniel paused to consider his options. He could continue down this path, living a life of secrecy and danger, or he could use Emily's departure as an opportunity to start fresh. The money he had accumulated through his illegal activities was enough to sustain him for several lifetimes. He could disappear entirely, leaving behind both his criminal empire and his old life. The idea appealed to him more than he cared to admit. But before he could make any decisions, Daniel knew he needed closure. Emily might have walked away thinking she had won, but she had underestimated him. She had no idea what he was capable of, or what resources he had at his disposal. If Daniel wanted to move forward, he needed to confront her one last time. Not to beg for forgiveness or plead for reconciliation, but to remind her that people are rarely who they seem. And if anyone understood the power of deception, it was him. As he closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. The game wasn't over yet. As the days stretched into weeks, Emily's initial sense of triumph began to fade. She had left Daniel with a boldness she hadn't known she possessed, taking everything she thought mattered: money, possessions, even Max. For the first time in years, she felt free, untethered from the life that had suffocated her. But freedom came with its own set of challenges, and Emily quickly realized that starting over wasn't as glamorous as it seemed. Her new apartment downtown was small, but stylish, a stark contrast to the sprawling suburban home she had shared with Daniel. At first, she reveled in the novelty of independence. She decorated the space with items she had taken from their old house, arranging them in ways that reflected her personality rather than his. She spent her mornings sipping coffee on the balcony, watching the city wake up below her. She filled her afternoons with shopping trips and lunches with friends, enjoying the attention that came with being single again. And at night, she went out to trendy bars and restaurants, laughing louder and staying out later than she ever had during her marriage. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to show. The money she had taken from their joint account dwindled faster than she anticipated. Rent, utilities, groceries, and other expenses added up quickly, leaving her with less and less each month. Her designer wardrobe and expensive handbags, once symbols of success, now felt like burdens. They reminded her of the life she had abandoned, a life she was struggling to replace. Emily tried to distract herself by throwing herself into work. Before leaving Daniel, she had dabbled in freelance graphic design, creating logos and marketing materials for local businesses. Now, she poured all her energy into building a client base, hoping to turn her side hustle into a full-time career. It wasn't easy. Clients were unpredictable, deadlines were tight, and competition was fierce. Some days she felt overwhelmed by self-doubt, wondering if she had made a mistake by walking away. Other days she convinced herself that she could make it work, that she didn't need Daniel or anyone else to define her worth. Despite her efforts to stay positive, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Little things started happening, things she couldn't explain. One morning she woke up to find her favorite necklace missing from her jewelry box. She searched the apartment thoroughly, retracing her steps and questioning whether she had misplaced it, but it was nowhere to be found. A few days later, her laptop froze unexpectedly, erasing hours of work she hadn't saved. Frustrated and exhausted, she chalked it up to bad luck. Then came the messages. At first, they were subtle. A text from an unknown number saying, "Are you sure you know who you're dealing with?" Or an email with no subject line containing a single sentence, "You've only scratched the surface." Emily dismissed them as pranks, assuming someone was playing a cruel joke on her. But when the notes became more frequent and more personal, she began to feel uneasy. One message read, "Do you really think you took everything?" Another said, "He's not who you think he is." The words haunted her, lingering in her mind long after she deleted the messages. Who could be sending them? Was it Daniel trying to scare her into coming back? Or was it someone else entirely? Emily didn't know what to believe. She tried to convince herself that she was overreacting, that stress and paranoia were getting the better of her. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread. Max, her golden retriever, seemed to sense her anxiety. He followed her everywhere, his tail wagging less enthusiastically than usual. One evening, as Emily sat on the couch scrolling through social media, Max suddenly perked up, barking at the window. Startled, Emily rushed over to see what had caught his attention. The street outside was empty, bathed in the orange glow of streetlights. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching her. The next day, Emily, decided to take action. She installed extra locks on her doors and downloaded a security app for her phone. She avoided sharing details about her daily routine online and kept her curtains drawn at night. These precautions made her feel safer, but they also reinforced the unsettling truth. She wasn't in control anymore. Someone or something was messing with her, and she had no idea why. Meanwhile, Daniel watched from the shadows, carefully, orchestrating every move. He had always been good at reading people, anticipating their reactions before they even knew what they wanted. Emily's departure had hurt him, yes, but it had also given him clarity. For years, he had hidden behind facades, juggling two identities to protect himself and those around him. Now, with nothing left to lose, he embraced the darker side of his nature, the side that thrived on strategy, manipulation, and control. Daniel's plan was simple, yet effective. He wanted Emily to feel unsettled, to question everything she thought she knew about him. By planting cryptic messages and arranging minor disruptions in her life, he hoped to remind her of the power dynamic between them. He wasn't seeking revenge, at least not in the traditional sense. Instead, he wanted to teach her a lesson, that actions have consequences and ignorance can be dangerous. To achieve this, Daniel used his network of contacts to gather information about Emily's new life. He knew where she lived, where she worked, and who she spent time with. He monitored her social media accounts, noting the places she frequented and the habits she developed. Armed with this knowledge, he orchestrated a series of events designed to keep her on edge. A missing piece of jewelry here, a glitchy device there, it was all part of the game. At first, Daniel enjoyed watching Emily squirm. Seeing her confidence, waver brought him a twisted sense of satisfaction. But as the days passed, he began to question his motives. Was he doing this to punish her, or was he simply trying to reclaim his dignity? Did he want her to suffer, or did he secretly hope she would come to understand him better? These questions gnawed at him, forcing him to confront the complexities of his emotions. One evening, as he sat alone in his study reviewing surveillance footage of Emily's apartment, Daniel paused to consider the bigger picture. What was he really trying to accomplish? If Emily discovered the truth about his double life, how would she react? Would she hate him for lying to her all these years? Or would she admire his resourcefulness and cunning? Part of him wanted to tell her, to watch her face, as she realized just how wrong she had been about him. But another part of him knew better. Revealing his secrets wouldn't fix anything. It would only complicate matters further. Still, Daniel couldn't deny the thrill of the chase. Each step of his plan brought him closer to Emily, forcing her to confront the reality she had ignored for so long. Whether it led to reconciliation or destruction remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: the game wasn't over yet. Emily's life had become a maze of uncertainty. Every day brought new challenges, both practical and emotional. The money she had taken from Daniel was nearly gone, forcing her to tighten her belt in ways she hadn't anticipated. Rent payments loomed large, and the cost of groceries seemed to rise each week. Her once lavish lifestyle now felt like a distant memory, replaced by late-night calculations and budget spreadsheets that left her feeling defeated. But it wasn't just the financial strain that weighed on her. It was the creeping sense that she was being watched. The cryptic messages continued to arrive, sometimes via text, sometimes through emails with no sender name. They were vague enough to be dismissed as pranks, yet specific enough to make her question their origin. One message read, "You think you've escaped, but you're still playing his game." Another simply said, "He knows where you are." At first, Emily tried to rationalize these occurrences. She told herself they were coincidences, or perhaps the result of an overactive imagination fueled by stress. But when strange things began happening in her apartment, she couldn't ignore them any longer. Lights flickered at odd times, even though there were no electrical issues. Her phone would buzz with notifications only for her to find nothing on the screen. Once she came home to find Max pacing nervously near the door, growling softly at something unseen. When she checked the locks, they appeared untouched, but the unease lingered. Desperate for answers, Emily turned to her friends. Over coffee, one afternoon she confided in Sarah, her closest confidant, about the messages and the unsettling incidents. Sarah listened intently, her brow furrowed with concern. "Do you think it's Daniel?" she asked finally. Emily hesitated before responding. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to believe it's him because at least then I'd know who I'm dealing with. But another part of me thinks, maybe it's not him. Maybe it's someone else entirely." Sarah suggested hiring a private investigator, someone who could look into the matter objectively. At first, Emily resisted the idea. Hiring a PI felt extreme, almost paranoid. But as the days passed and the disturbances grew more frequent, she realized she had no other choice. If she wanted peace of mind and a chance to reclaim her life, she needed to uncover the truth. The private investigator she hired was named Robert Keller, a grizzled man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. He listened patiently as Emily recounted everything, the cryptic messages, the flickering lights, the eerie sense that someone was watching her. Without judgment, he assured her that he would get to the bottom of it. "You're not crazy," he said firmly. "If something feels wrong, it probably is. Let me do my job." Over the next few weeks, Robert dug deep. He reviewed Emily's phone records, traced the origins of the anonymous messages, and conducted surveillance on her apartment. What he uncovered shocked her to her core. It wasn't just evidence of Daniel's double life. It was proof of a world she never could have imagined. Through meticulous research, Robert pieced together fragments of information that painted a startling picture. Under the pseudonym Marcus Kane, Daniel operated as one of the most skilled art thieves in the underground world. Security footage showed him slipping in and out of high-profile locations, bypassing alarms and cameras with ease. Bank statements, linked to offshore accounts, revealed millions of dollars worth of transactions, all carefully hidden from prying eyes. And photographs of stolen artwork matched descriptions of pieces rumored to have vanished without a trace. When Robert presented his findings to Emily, she struggled to process what she was seeing. The man she had married, the man she thought she knew, wasn't real. He was a master manipulator, a criminal genius who had lived two lives under one roof. The realization hit her like a tidal wave, leaving her breathless and disoriented. How had she missed the signs? How had she been so blind? For hours after Robert left, Emily sat alone in her apartment, staring at the documents spread across her dining table. Each page was a reminder of how little she truly understood about Daniel. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she had experienced before, not because of the lies themselves, but because of the sheer scale of his deception. He hadn't just hidden a secret hobby or indulged in harmless vices. He had built an entire second identity, complete with aliases, networks, and crimes that defied belief. Her initial reaction was anger. How dare he play such a dangerous game, while pretending to be her husband? How dare he keep her in the dark, treating her like a pawn in his elaborate schemes? The rage bubbled inside her, threatening to spill over. But as the hours passed, anger gave way to fear. If Daniel was capable of this level of deception, what else might he be capable of? Was he behind the messages and the strange occurrences in her apartment? Or was someone else using his secrets against her? That night, unable to sleep, Emily wandered to the window and stared out at the city below. The streets were quiet, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. For the first time since leaving Daniel, she questioned whether she had made the right decision. Had she underestimated him so completely that she had put herself in danger? The thought sent a chill down her spine. The next morning, Emily decided to confront Daniel. She didn't know what she would say or how he would react, but she knew she couldn't keep living in fear. Armed with the evidence Robert had gathered, she drove to the suburban house they had once shared. As she approached the front door, her heart pounded in her chest. Taking a deep breath, she knocked firmly. When Daniel opened the door, he looked surprised but composed, as though he had been expecting her all along. His expression gave nothing away, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of curiosity. "Emily," he said calmly, "what brings you here?" Without waiting for an invitation, Emily stepped inside. The house looked different, emptier, quieter, but the air still carried traces of their past. She placed the folder containing Robert's findings on the kitchen counter and met Daniel's gaze. "I know," she said simply. "I know who you really are." For a moment, Daniel said nothing. Then slowly, he smiled, a small, enigmatic curve of his lips that sent another shiver down Emily's spine. "Do you?" he asked softly. "Do you really?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Emily realized then that knowing the truth didn't mean understanding it or controlling it. Daniel was still 10 steps ahead, always calculating, always planning. Whether he intended to harm her or help her remained unclear. But one thing was certain: their story was far from over.